Hi everyone, it's Michelle. Welcome back. So today I thought I would do a video catching you up on what I've been reading. It's been probably 4 or 5 weeks, I think, since the last time I shared with you the books I've been reading, and I haven't read a ton in the last 4 or 5 weeks. I've gotten through 4 books. You know, the weather here is getting warmer. I spend less time reading and more time outdoors, which is a good thing. But I thought I would share with you the books that I have finished over the last 4 or 5 weeks because a couple of them were really, really great. So let's jump right in and get started. In no particular order, I will say that. The first one is Happy People Read and Drink Coffee. And can I just say, look at the cover. Beautiful, beautiful. This is by Agnes, and I'm going to butcher the last name, Martin Lugand. She is, I'm sure it's pronounced Martin Lugand, something like that. She is a French author. I believe this is her first novel that has been translated to English. So quite recently, an American publishing company or U.S. publishing company published this book in English. And so the name of the book drew me right in. For anyone who knows me, I love to read and I love to drink coffee, so why would I not buy this book? So let me read you the blurb and then tell you what I thought. Okay, Diane seems to have the perfect life. She is a wife, a mother, and the owner of Happy People Read and Drink Coffee, a cozy literary cafe in Paris. So we've got books, coffee, Paris, right up my alley, right? But when she suddenly loses her beloved husband and daughter in a car accident, the world as she knows it instantly vanishes. Trapped and haunted by her memories, Diane retreats from friends and family, unable and unwilling to move forward. 1 year later, Diane shocks her loved ones with her surprising decision to move to a small town on the Irish coast. Finally determined to rebuild her life, Diane's new home is all quiet and comfort until she meets Edward, the attractive yet taciturn Irish photographer who lives next door. Abrasive and unwelcoming, Edward resents Diane's intrusion into his life of solitude. Diane wants nothing more than to heal in peace, but her neighbor's gruff manner provokes her. Can their standoff bear the weight of an undeniable attraction? At once heartbreaking and uplifting, Diane's story is deeply felt, reminding us that love remembered is love enduring. So, I really liked this book. I will say that. It is, it's quite short, 230 pages, so it's quite short, but that's a pretty good description of the book. You don't even really get to find out about her bookstore. Like 3 pages into the book, her husband and young daughter are killed in a car accident, and she is in such anguish, she retreats into her house, you know, and doesn't want to be around her friends, doesn't want to be around her family. She I think she didn't even really want to attend their funeral services, that kind of thing. She's never visited their grave. She has just withdrawn from the world. She has a business partner who is attempting to run her bookstore coffee shop that she was running. And she doesn't actually decide, I don't think she really decides to move to the Irish coast. She's getting pressured by her business partner, who happens to be a close friend of hers, and her family to get back to living and get out of her house and start doing things. And so I think to avoid them, she decides to run away to this small town on the Irish coast so that people will stop bothering her, because then they won't know what she's doing, that she's not coming out of her house and that kind of thing. But she gets there, and it's a very, very small town, and there's this mean man who lives next door, and okay, now that the phone is done ringing. So in the description, they call him gruff. He is actually just downright mean and rude. And she doesn't know anybody in the town really, and everybody seems to have the same opinion of him, that he's just this mean person. But through circumstances and him living next door and that kind of thing, they kind of get to know each other, kind of. And you can tell there's this sexual tension between them. But throughout the book, you're sort of like, where is this going? Is it going to go anywhere? And then, the book is about how the relationship progresses and then what happens in the end. And I thought it was a great story. I think it was very realistic about how tormented they both were. And it wasn't one of those perfect love stories, and the book doesn't actually end how I wanted it to end, which makes it even more real for me, because this is how life is, and people make decisions for different reasons, and everybody's life is different and their decisions are different and that kind of thing. And so it was a really, really good story. So this author has written a sequel to this book, but it hasn't been published in English yet. So I have to live with what I know happened in this story, which was very good. I very much enjoyed it. I highly recommend the book if you like that kind of story. And I'm pretty sure I read that whatever publishing company bought the rights to publish it in English also bought the movie rights. So perhaps someday this will be made into a movie, and I think it would be a great story to bring to the big screen, because the visual, she's in this Irish coastal town and he is a photographer, so the visuals in this book are amazing. Okay, moving on. This is another really good book that I read. This is a advanced reader's copy. This book is actually not coming out until, I believe, the first week of June 7th, so just another week. This is by Ian Reid, and it is called I Am Thinking of Ending Things, which you can take the meaning of that sentence many, many ways, right? So I'm going to read you the blurb and then talk a little bit more about the story. I'm going to read you the back of the book, actually. Well, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the top of the book says, "You will be scared, but you will not know why." In this deeply suspenseful and irresistibly unnerving debut novel, a man and his girlfriend are on their way to a secluded farm. When the two take an unexpected detour, she is left stranded in a deserted high school, wondering if there is any escape at all. What follows is a twisted unraveling that will haunt you long after the last page is turned. In this smart, suspenseful, and intense literary thriller, debut novelist Ian Reid explores the depths of the human psyche, questioning consciousness, free will, and the value of relationships, fear, and the limitations of solitude. Reminiscent of, goes on to say it's reminiscent of a few different books, that it's tense, gripping, atmospheric. This novel pulls you in from the very first page and never lets you go. I will say that is a very true statement. So this is a thriller. It's a very psychological thriller, really. And it was a great read. Here's what I'll say. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give away the story, because it is a very interesting way to tell a story. But it was really good. And when you first open the book, there's a letter from the editor, the executive editor of Scout Press, who is the company who publishes this. And it says, "Dear reader, you are about to begin one of the most unnerving, chilling, psychological, and page-turning novels of the past decade. And yes, I stand by that claim." So, it's really, I think unnerving is a great way to describe the book, the story. From the very first page, you start reading it, there isn't a lot of like blood and guts and gore in this book, but when you read it, it is unnerving from the very beginning. And I can't tell you why it is, because it's sort of like one of those things that when I started reading this, I told my husband, I'm like, I think I'm going to have, this book is going to keep me up, or I'm going to have nightmares, or because you can just, there was just like evil. Like when you're reading it, it's like you have this sense of something is bad, something bad is happening, or something is bad. And it just sticks with you while you're reading this whole book, which was really great. I love a good thriller. For those of you who don't know, I love a good thriller. This is his first novel, but Ian Reid has written, I believe, a couple of nonfiction books, and art essays and that kind of thing. So it really, I highly recommend that if you like thrillers, that you pick this book up when it comes out, which is June 7th. So again, I'm thinking of ending things. If you like a good psychological thriller, this is a good psychological thriller. And it was, like, to me, very unexpected that it would be this good, because typically when things are hyped like that, sometimes they let me down a little bit. And this one kind of, I thought, where is this going? Where is this going? Where is this going? And then it just kept, you know, like really pulling you in, and then you got afraid, and you know, you got afraid for the characters, and highly recommend. Okay, moving on. So next I read The Restaurant Critic's Wife by Elizabeth Laban, or Laban, I'm not sure how you say her name. This is a book that, the type of book that I typically wouldn't buy or pick up, but I actually won this on a blog contest on one of the book blogs that I read. I'm trying to think of what blog it was, because it's been a little while. I think it was The Lovely Bookshelf. I'll put the name of her blog here. But she had a contest, I entered, and I won this book. And so I read it, and it was quite funny. So let me tell you what it's about. Lila Soto has a master's degree that's gathering dust, a work-obsessed husband, 2 kids, and lots of questions about how she ended up here. In their new city of Philadelphia, Lila's husband, Sam, takes his job as a restaurant critic a little too seriously. To protect his professional credibility, he's determined to remain anonymous. Soon, his preoccupation with anonymity takes over their lives as he tries to limit the family's contact with anyone who might have ties to the foodie world. Meanwhile, Lila craves adult conversation and some relief from the constraints of her homemaker role. With her patience wearing thin, she begins to question everything: her decision to get pregnant again, her break from her career, her marriage, even if leaving her ex-boyfriend was the right thing to do. As Sam becomes more and more fixated on keeping his identity secret, Lila begins to wonder if her own identity has completely disappeared and what it will take to get it back. So, he is a restaurant critic in Philadelphia. Lila, his wife, has taken a break from her job because she has gotten pregnant with their second child. So they've got a young child at home, and she's pregnant with the second one, and they moved to Philadelphia for his job as a restaurant critic. And she sort of takes a break from her job. She's like a PR person at a very large hotel chain. She did all of the like big events across the country for them. So she was quite, she had a very busy job. She was, you know, pretty important and always going and doing and that kind of thing. And she's, you know, sort of initially chosen to stay home, and now she's questioning that decision. And her husband doesn't want her or her child interacting with any of their neighbors. He doesn't want anyone to know who they are, which is one of the reasons he doesn't want her going back to work, because then people will know by her last name that she could be his wife, and then they're going to know who he is. So, and he doesn't want that. So it's about what happens, you know, during this period of time. And, you know, he has to go to restaurants, obviously. He's a restaurant critic, you know, and he wears disguises, and funny things happen with those disguises. And this book is both very humorous, but it's also a good story about what happens to us when, you know, we let who we are slip a little bit because, you know, for someone else, basically. And, you know, he's trying to pressure her to give up some of her friends and some of the new people she's met, and, you know, it's sort of like how that torments her and how he doesn't see that, and so it was very, very good. Like, this is a very light read, but like the subject matter is really interesting, because this, I'm sure, happens all the time, right? But it's got that bit of humor in it because he's this restaurant critic and he's always trying to hide from people, and very funny. Highly recommend. I haven't read any of her other books. Is she the one? Yes, she is the one who, she also wrote The Tragedy Paper, and when I read about that book, I definitely want to read that as well. So this is like her third novel, I think. And she actually does live in Philadelphia, and I believe her husband really is a restaurant critic. So, yeah, very funny. Highly recommend if you like funny kind of books like that. Okay, and then lastly, I read Blackout, Remembering the Things I Drank to Forget by Sarah, I don't know how you say her last name, Hepola. This is a memoir. I don't think I really need to, I'll read you a little bit of the blurb here. For Sarah Hepola, alcohol was the gasoline of all adventures. She spent her evenings at cocktail parties and dark bars where she proudly stayed till last call. Drinking felt like freedom, part of her birthright as a strong, enlightened 21st century woman. But there was a price. She often blacked out, waking up with a blank space where 4 hours should be. Mornings became detective work on her own life. What did I say last night? How did I meet that guy? She apologized for things she couldn't remember doing, as though she were cleaning up after an evil twin. Publicly, she covered her shame with self-deprecating jokes, and her career flourished. But as the blackouts accumulated, she could no longer avoid a sinking truth. The fuel she thought she needed was draining her spirit instead. The blurb continues on, but so that gives you a really good description of what this book is about. She is alcoholic, total alcoholic, but she's very functioning. She's very successful in her career, but she blacks out all the time and, ends up waking up in beds with men she doesn't even know what their names are, and all kinds of things happen. And throughout the first part of the book, she's losing her friends. Her friends don't want to be around her anymore because she's so volatile. You never know. When she gets drunk, she's going to embarrass everybody. What is she going to do? And that kind of thing. And then, the second part of the book is about, her getting sober and, having to face all that and having to figure out how to face events and people sober, because when you go through your life a certain way, when you have to be sober and see things differently, it can be a challenge. So for me, I'm not even sure why I bought this book, but I think you need to read this in order to sort of get into it. So I think that if you have had a situation with addiction, or you've lived with someone who's been an addict or that kind of thing, I think that you can really appreciate this book. I don't want to say it's not a good book. I think the timing just wasn't right for me, because this book is her story, and it is it is her story and how her triumph. It's very difficult to break the habit of addiction, and she did it, and she talks very candidly about the things that she did, and when she was drunk and that kind of thing. And so I give her props for that. I just think that this book is not for everybody. I think and I think that's true of many books. I think that the timing has to be right for you to read a book, or it's just not sort of worth it. But I thought the fact that she was so candid and open, and that part of that was so funny but so sad, made this book very readable and made you were rooting for her, and you wanted to continue reading it. But I do think this book won't be for everybody, but well written, very honest, humorous, sad, but honest. So that's what I have to say about that. Again, I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure why I bought this. I don't remember buying this. I'm sure I did at some point. And it's not an old book, so yeah, maybe I felt at some point I needed to read it. Sometimes I like to read about people's struggles and who triumph in the end, and by reading the blurb, she's going to triumph in the end. But again, it's well written. It was a good book, but the subject matter is not going to be for everybody. So those are the 4 books that I've read over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing about them. The 2 that I would recommend the most are these guys. Happy People Read and Drink Coffee, loved. And I'm thinking of Ending Things, which I also loved. If you love a scary story, this is more about love and loss and sort of getting back to life, and this is just a crazy psychological thriller. So please share with us in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought, or if you have some fantastic books that you've read recently, please share those in the comments as well. We all love reading about what everyone's enjoying, so we can look up the books and decide if we want to read them for ourselves. So Please keep everything spoiler free. That is it for today. I hope everybody's having a fantastic day, and I will talk to you all again soon.